For more than 70 years, Mel Brooks was never truly alone. There was always laughter waiting somewhere, always a familiar voice, always a routine that made the passing of time feel harmless. And then, suddenly, there was silence. A silence so heavy it startled Hollywood itself. For days, headlines screamed, rumors multiplied, and the speculation and the spread like wildfire. But the one voice everyone expected to hear remained completely quiet. Mel Brooks said nothing. Not a joke, not a statement, not even a carefully worded sentence, because this wasn't just another Hollywood tragedy. This was personal. For Mel Brooks, the loss connected directly to the deepest bond of his life, a bond forged decades earlier with Carl Reiner, the man who was more than a collaborator, more than a friend. He was family. When Carl Reiner passed away, Mel didn't just lose a partner in comedy. He lost the rhythm of his everyday life, the dinners, the routines, the quiet joy of sitting beside someone who knew him completely. And so, after Carl was gone, Mel found comfort in continuing that ritual with Carl's son, Rob Reiner. Same evenings, same television show, same soft laughter filled with shared memory. It was never spoken out loud, but everyone close to them understood. This was how Mel kept Carl alive until the night everything collapsed. When the news broke, cameras gathered outside a house that once echoed with warmth, humor, and decades of shared history. Now it stood dark, still, frozen. And for the first time in his long life, Mel Brooks faced not one loss, but the unbearable weight of many stacked on top of each other. Only after days of exhaustion and grief did he finally agree to speak, not as a legend, not as a comedian, but as a man carrying regret, love, and a truth that would shock everyone who heard it. Because what Mel Brooks finally admitted would change the way people understood this tragedy forever. When Mel finally sat down to speak, his voice didn't sound prepared. There was no polish, no performance, only exhaustion. He didn't begin with the crime. He didn't begin with the headlines. He began with guilt. People wanted simple answers. They wanted to believe this was a sudden tragedy, an unpredictable breakdown, something no one could have stopped. Mel shook his head. He paused for a long time before saying the words that would haunt everyone who heard them. This was not an accident. The room went quiet. He explained that this didn't happen overnight. There was no single moment where everything suddenly snapped. What happened was slow, painfully slow. We watched this coming for 10 years, Mel admitted. 10 years, and we let it happen. That sentence carried no anger, only regret. Mel confessed that those closest to the family were not truly shocked. They had seen the warning signs, they had felt the tension growing inside that house. They had noticed how love, once protective, had quietly crossed into denial. But Mel refused to turn Rob's son into a monster. Instead, he described something far more disturbing. A family that loved too fiercely. Parents so afraid of losing their child that they slowly surrendered every boundary meant to protect themselves. Rob, Mel said, never saw his son as dangerous. He saw him as wounded, broken, someone who could still be saved. Even as the situation worsened, Rob clung to that belief. Mel recalled visiting Rob months before everything collapsed. Rob moved slowly, exhausted, barely eating, barely sleeping. He paced the room like a man who no longer felt safe anywhere. That night, Rob finally said the words he had been avoiding. "I have to lock my bedroom door at night." Imagine that. A father, a storyteller whose entire life was built on connection and trust, forced to hide from his own child. Mel said he would never forget the look in Rob's eyes. Fear mixed with shame, as if admitting the truth felt like a personal failure. Rob spoke as softly, almost apologetically, as if fear itself was something he had done wrong. What Mel saw wasn't just fear, it was sacrifice without limits. Rob and his wife absorbed outbursts, endured endless sleepless nights, protected their son from friends, authorities, and reality itself. Mel described it as the quietest, most destructive kind of love he had ever witnessed. A love so intense that parents are willing to carry the entire storm, as long as their child doesn't have to face it alone. And when Mel finally asked the question no one else dared to ask, everything changed. Why didn't you call the police? Why didn't you create distance? Rob went silent for a long time. Then he said the sentence that explained everything. I promised my wife I wouldn't abandon him. He slammed his hand down and said, if I throw him out, he dies on the streets. If I keep him here, maybe I can still save him. Mel understood in that moment. Rob wasn't unaware. He wasn't blind. He knew the danger. But he believed a father's love could do what laws, doctors, and logic could not. And that belief was the real turning point. Mel admitted that no one ever called Rob stubborn out loud, but everyone knew it. That same iron determination that once built flawless films, that same refusal to compromise on vision, slowly turned dangerous when aimed at something that could not be controlled. Rob believed discipline, patience, and love could guide his son the way he guided actors. That if he stayed calm long enough, consistent enough, everything would eventually resolve. But life doesn't follow scripts. Mel said Rob's love became unconditional in a way that erased reality itself. Boundaries vanished, warnings were ignored, fear was reframed as misunderstanding, and over time, the cost became unbearable. In the last 2 years, Mel watched Rob and his wife deteriorate, not just emotionally, financially, psychologically, spiritually. Their son didn't just ask for help anymore, he demanded it. Money became leverage. Projects became weapons. Every conversation turned into a negotiation filled with blame. Mel recalled messages Rob once showed him, long paragraphs soaked in rage, accusations that his parents had ruined his life, that they owed him everything. And yet, the next day, Rob would still step in, pay rent, buy a car, fund another attempt. Mel called it a Hollywood disease, the belief that if you throw enough resources at a problem, it must eventually work. Rob truly believed he could manage recovery the same way he managed productions, with enough control, enough money, enough love. Mel, who understood both comedy and tragedy better than most men alive, felt something closing in. He described a small holiday gathering, quiet, intimate, tense. Their son was there. His eyes, Mel said, no longer looked like a child's. They were cold, calculating. When Rob made a self-mocking joke, everyone laughed nervously. Everyone except him. He stared. Later that night, Mel pulled Rob aside and grabbed his shoulders. You have to get him out, Mel whispered. He's not looking at you with love. He's looking at you with hunger. Rob tore his arm away. You sound like the critics, he snapped. You don't understand him like I do. He's in pain. Mel broke down while recounting that moment. Because Rob wasn't lying. He believed every word. But belief had replaced judgment, and love had replaced protection. Mel realized then that Rob could no longer tell the difference between devotion and destruction, that the very love meant to save his family was now quietly consuming it. And worst of all, Mel knew he was running out of time. Mel said the detail that still wakes him in the middle of the night isn't what happened afterward. It's what happened before. The official timeline lists times and events, but Mel knew the real ending began hours earlier. Late that night, his phone rang. The house was dark, silent. Mel stared at the screen, heart racing, already feeling something was wrong. For a brief moment, he almost didn't answer, as if some part of him already knew. This call was different. When he picked up, Rob's voice came through, barely above a whisper. It wasn't the sound of someone calling to talk. It sounded like someone saying goodbye without realizing it. Rob told Mel that his son was unraveling completely, shouting about the will, demanding that everything be left to him. The house, the assets, control over projects, control over legacy, everything. Mel could hear crashing sounds in the background, furniture breaking, objects hitting the floor, a lifetime of memories being destroyed piece by piece. He keeps saying everything has to be his, Rob whispered. That the rest means nothing? Mel didn't hesitate. Leave, he said. Get in the car. Drive here right now. There was a long pause. Then Rob said the sentence that froze Mel's blood. I can't leave her. Michelle was still in the room, trying to calm the storm, trying to protect the man she loved and the child she had spent years defending. If I leave, Rob said quietly, he'll turn everything on her. Mel begged him. But Rob had already made his choice. He wasn't staying because he believed things would calm down. He was staying because he refused to abandon his wife in the middle of chaos they had faced together for years. Rob walked back into that room, standing between Michelle and everything spiraling out of control. That was the last time Mel ever heard his voice. Heavy breathing filled the phone line, shouting, crashing, sounds that burned themselves into Mel's memory forever. Then silence. Mel said that silence was louder than anything he had ever experienced, louder than laughter, louder than applause, louder than grief. And in that silence, Mel understood something unbearable. Love had taken Rob to the very edge, and beyond it, Mel made one thing painfully clear. This wasn't the story of a child born as destruction. It was the story of unbearable pressure, generations of expectation, a legendary last name, a shadow so large it blocked out identity itself. Mel said Rob's son grew up carrying the weight of two giants, the legacy of Carl, the success of Rob. Talent was there, ambition too. But effort never matched expectation. When recognition didn't come easily, resentment took its place. Blame followed soon after. Mel described it as decay hidden behind perfection. From the outside, the house in Brentwood looked flawless. Trimmed lawns, calm streets, holiday lights. Inside, something had been rotting for years. What angered Mel most wasn't just the family's silence. It was the system around them. Therapists, doctors, highly paid advisors. Instead of drawing firm lines, they softened the truth. They told Rob that boundaries were outdated, that unconditional acceptance was the answer. Mel didn't hesitate to name them for what he believed they were, enablers. They took money to repeat what Rob wanted to hear. They labeled violent thoughts with technical language, but no one spoke plainly about danger. No one said this could end in irreversible loss. That was why Mel finally decided to speak. The legal process, he said, no longer mattered to him. The facts were already written. What mattered was how Rob would be remembered. Mel refused to let Rob be reduced to a headline or remembered as the victim of a random act. He wanted people to understand something far more unsettling. Rob stayed. He stayed to protect his wife. He stayed to protect his son. He stayed because he believed that was what a father was supposed to do. He stayed until the very end. Mel said the most painful truth of all was this: Rob's sacrifice did not save his son. It only sealed his own fate. After saying that, Mel fell completely silent. The room felt frozen in time, surrounded by photographs, memories, decades of laughter now turned into echoes. Mel looked like a man trapped between centuries, carrying the unbearable knowledge that he had seen this coming. And that knowledge, he admitted, was heavier than grief itself. After the words were spoken, Mel Brooks didn't rush to fill the silence. He let it sit, because silence, he said, was now his closest companion. The hardest part isn't anger, Mel whispered. It's the silence. The silence of phone calls that no longer come, of dinners that no longer happen, of routines that once gave shape to his days and now exist only in memory. For nearly 70 years, Mel's life had been anchored by one constant: Carl Reiner. And through Carl, Rob. Now both were gone. Mel looked around the room as he spoke, old photographs, smiling faces frozen in time, moments that once felt eternal. "I am the last one," he said quietly, not said with pride, not said with drama, said like a fact he had finally accepted. Nearly a century of life hadn't just meant witnessing history. It meant outliving the people who gave that history meaning. It meant carrying memories no one else could fully understand anymore. Mel admitted something that shocked even the interviewer. "I have to live knowing I saw this coming." He blamed himself for staying silent, for not forcing intervention, for choosing loyalty over confrontation. He wondered aloud whether unconditional love can ever truly save someone when responsibility has been ignored for too long. And then Mel explained why he finally broke his silence. He didn't speak for attention. He didn't speak for justice. He spoke as a warning to powerful parents, to wealthy families, to people who believe love alone can erase violence. Love cannot rewrite reality, Mel said. It cannot replace boundaries. All his life, Mel Brooks had made the world laugh at its darkest truths. He mocked hate, exposed absurdity, even laughed in the face of death. This time, there was no punchline, no satire, only a reality so cold that comedy could no longer soften it. As the interview ended, Mel reached out and grabbed the journalist's arm, his voice a steady, heavy, final. "Don't turn this into a rumor," he said. "Don't turn it into entertainment." He wanted Rob's story to remain uncomfortable, unpolished, undeniable, because beneath the awards, the gates, and the public praise were ordinary people, parents who loved too hard, friends who stayed silent, warnings that were ignored, and a tragedy built not from one moment, but from years of small choices. Mel Brooks had finally broken his silence, and the echo, he said, would last far longer than any headline. Before Mel Brooks became a name carved into American comedy, there was one bond that shaped the man he would become: Carl Reiner. Mel said their friendship wasn't built on spotlight moments. It was built on the quiet ones: backstage jokes, long conversations, two outsiders using laughter as a way to survive the world. They first connected in the mid-1950s while working on Your Show of Shows. Mel's wild creative energy hit like lightning. Carl's precision and calm focus grounded it. From the beginning, Carl looked at him and said something that felt like optimism until it became prophecy. "I think we're going to do great things together." And they did. Their bond reached a kind of legendary purity with the 2000 38-year-old man, a character that began as private jokes between friends, then grew into performances, albums, and a piece of American culture that refused to fade. But Mel said the greatest creation they ever built wasn't a character, it was the friendship itself. In the final decade of Carl's life, they created a routine that became sacred. Almost every evening, Mel would drive to Carl's house in Beverly Hills. They'd eat dinner, watch Jeopardy, argue over answers, then watch movies together, sometimes cheap action films, sometimes their own old work. Those nights weren't about fame. They weren't about nostalgia. They were about being near someone who truly knew you. Mel admitted that people laughed when he once joked he went for the friendship, the love, and the free food. But beneath that humor was the truth. Those dinners were lifelines. When Carl Reiner passed away in June 2020, Mel said the emptiness that followed didn't have language. Even watching television felt hollow without Carl beside him. And yet, Mel still went back. He would visit the house, set the table, sit in front of the television like his friend was still there, preserving routine as tribute. Then, slowly, Mel found comfort in continuing that ritual with Carl's son, Rob. The same evenings, the same show, the same soft laughter filled with memory. A way to keep Carl close without ever saying it out loud, and then that link was severed too. Now, approaching 99, Mel Brooks said his life has become quieter, but not empty. It is filled with memories, creativity, echoes of laughter, and grief carried with dignity. He spoke of walking daily, writing, revising, thinking like an artist who refuses to stop, but he didn't pretend the loneliness wasn't real, because what weighs on him now isn't only losing Rob. It's the idea that he has outlived the people who made his world feel human. The interview ended the way the entire story began, not with anger, not with dramatic accusations, with the cold truth of silence. Mel Brooks said the tragedy should not be remembered as a headline. It should be remembered as a warning that love without boundaries can become dangerous, that denial can look like devotion, that protecting someone from consequences can sometimes protect the very thing destroying them. And when the world moves on to the next story, Mel said he will still be sitting there, surrounded by photographs, holding memories that no one else can carry. Because once the laughter is gone, the silence is all that remains.